This is the Women Emerging Expedition podcast, so you can follow the ups and downs and the roundabouts of the expedition and play your part in them. 24 women started on the 28th of May 2022 on this virtual expedition that will take 9 months. We are women from across the world determined to find an approach to leadership that resonates with women. We'll be successful so that women the world over will be able to say, if that's leadership, I'm in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Julie Middleton here, Expedition Leader. This episode is devoted to the expedition, but for a change we're not talking about the 24 women on the expedition, the members of it, but to the hundreds of women who have sort of surrounded it, who have made it all possible and helped us on our way. We're going to start first with Deepali. Deepali, who runs Rockefeller in India, the Rockefeller Foundation in India, and it was her that made it possible for us to book, to meet together in February 2023 at Bellagio in Lake Como in Italy, that extraordinary palace owned by the Rockefeller Foundation, a place of peace where extraordinary wisdom has emerged from it over the years. And it means we're going to be there in February at the finale of the expedition. Being there, without doubt, puts a great deal of pressure on us because we're going to have to come up with something pretty glorious to justify being there. But it also, I'm pretty sure, will play a key role in lifting us up so that we do exactly that. When we started off on the expedition in May 2022, Deepali spoke on the podcast and wished us good luck in our exploring. Here's just a small clip from that.
You've taken so much of time and effort to really get the unusual women together who normally would not be in this journey together. So I think that in itself is going to trigger some very, very important conversations. And that whole discovery and that support system that you're creating through this journey is going to be really something to watch out for, and is truly going to be transformational, not just for these leaders, but for many, many of us who are really watching and really wanting to see how we can be playing our part to make this end. I don't think there's going to be an end of this expedition. The journey is going to go on and go through various phases. So how can we, who are not part of that journey on a day-to-day basis, like the 24 women you've identified, but I very much feel part of that as well.
Deepali, we felt your presence all the way through. You may not feel part of the journey, but we know that you are part of the journey. In that, you're pretty central to the journey. But thank you. So the next person we're going to talk to on this episode is a woman called Theo, a remarkable leader across the continent of Africa. And she's played a really crucial part of the expedition, as have a number of other leaders of all ages who have been what we've called guides to the expedition. They have taken the calls of members. They have played with the ideas of members. They've shared their experiences with an extraordinary generosity. And they've answered members' questions with an honesty that has enriched the expedition right the way through. You can find the full list of all the guides to the expedition if you go to the website womenemerging.org. That's womenemerging.org. You'll find little biographies of all of the guides, for whether that's Bin or Hilla or Paula or Asifa, Annie or Garvey or Zena or Kelly or May or Sabrina or Nandita or Veronica or Hatun or Saba, and there are so many more who have been extraordinary supporters and guides to the members of the expedition. Thank you to them all, but here we particularly focus on Theo, who had just come off a call with Falawe, one of the members of the expedition, and helped her to think through some quite big ideas that she had in her head.
Theo, you spoke recently to Falawe.
Yes. We spoke a short while ago, and it was a great conversation. It was really good speaking to her. She has some great ideas about looking at, and some great questions actually, around women's leadership and intergenerational leadership in Africa. And so the conversation was really interesting, partly because her questions were really great about how women live with, acknowledge, work with privilege in leadership, and what it takes to make sure that you're being truly inclusive in the leadership work that you're doing. And it was interesting to me because I've worked with different generations of women leaders in different parts of Africa, and she'd really highlighted some of the issues involved in making sure that women's leadership was genuine and was authentic and reflected some of the social justice and equality issues that we've been working on. So yes, I'm looking forward to speaking with her more.
Why do you think it's such a big issue in Africa?
Frankly, I think it's an issue everywhere. I actually think that a lot of the leadership work that people have spoken about in relation to women's leadership hasn't actually been, in my view, leadership. It's been more about management. And yes, it's great to have women managers, and they are very much needed. But I think leadership goes deeper than that, and that leadership brings in a whole range of issues around values, around principles, around vision, around relationship, and to have genuine and constructive women's leadership means that women have to have looked at all of those issues in relation to their own ways of being. And so I think it's not just in Africa, I think it's across the world, that unless women are very clear about the nature of their leadership, unless they're very clear about how their leadership and how their enactment of leadership reflects the principles and values that they speak of, then we end up with unauthenticity that is not helpful. I'm not sure that unauthenticity is a word, but you know what I mean.
And why is this a generational issue?
Oh no, I think when I say intergenerational, I think it shows throughout our generations. There are some older women leaders that I know of who are the epitome of lived leadership, and who do wonderful, wonderful work. But they're also older generation women that I have seen sometimes in Africa, sometimes in Europe and in North America, whose own privilege stops them actually being genuinely inclusive in the way in which they lead. But that's not just about older women. I've seen it in younger generation. Privilege is something that cuts across age, it cuts across ethnicity, it cuts across geography, and frankly, it cuts across politics as well.
When you say privilege, what do you mean?
I mean advantage within the societal systems within which we live.
And I suppose there are some women who think that they can't possibly have privilege because they're women.
Privilege is different to discrimination. You can be discriminated against, and that's when I start looking at when I very much think about systems, because we're talking about very often about systems of discrimination. So you can be a woman and be discriminated against, but I think we all have to acknowledge that there are different circumstances in which women live. And there's some women who have far greater access to power, far greater access to decision making, far greater access to choice. And as I said, sometimes that comes simply from where you're born in this world and how you then fit into overarching economic systems. Sometimes it comes from working your way into a system that then allows you greater access to choice and decision making. And sometimes, privilege finds its way to you through other methods. We're not all the same. We, in any of our lives, do. In my own life, I was very much given steps forward in my career by older women who were encouraging, who pushed, me to use my voice and use my experience and learn and move. But I have absolutely seen, older women who, partly because when people look at power as a zero-sum game, when they think there's a limited amount of power, they're scared about losing their grip on any power that they've managed to claw into their area of influence. And so sometimes women in that position will hold on to power and will see younger women coming in as a threat to the limited power they've accessed. But for as many women as I've seen do that, I've seen many more women who actually think you shouldn't have to struggle the way I struggled in order to access decision making, in order to exercise choice in your life, in your workspace, and in other places. So from my personal point of view, yes, there are women who say you have to be older before you're wiser. But I also know many, many, many more women who judge based on what you bring and what you offer.
So it brought joy to your heart to talk to Falawi?
It was. It was a really fun conversation. And it was really interesting. And she's one of those people that makes me feel that we have so many great examples of women's leadership in so many different ways. And very often we don't acknowledge that. But I have a very strong feeling that she will definitely, well, she must already be acknowledged as a leader in her field and with the people that she's working with. But I've got a very strong feeling that she's going to be very, very widely recognized as an amazing woman leader and someone who walks her talk.
Thank you, Theo, and to all the guides. If you'd like to be a guide and help us on the expedition and on our way, do send me an email on info@womenemerging.org. That's info@womenemerging.org. Send me an email, tell me about yourself, and let's do a Zoom and see if we can make it work. So next, after Deepali and Theo, is Marianne, who's a columnist for Forbes, who recently wrote that wonderful article that we've all been celebrating about the expedition. I asked her to share the insights that she's got from writing the article to picking up the ideas of the 24 women on the expedition. And I also actually asked her to read out one or two of the pieces that the expedition members had written to her as part of her research.
So go on, Marianne. How difficult was it to write this article?
The most difficult part about it was that there was so much great content, and it prompted so many different thoughts in my head that I easily could have written a book inspired by it. And then but so I wouldn't call it was difficult in a happy, difficult way, in the sense that there was just so much to offer in what I learned from it and what, these women shared, which, obviously inspired by this incredible idea you've had to put together this expedition.
Thank you, Marianne. Tell me what you've seen.
First and foremost is the reason that, part of the reason that inspired you to do this in the first place, which is that if we do, identify absolutely this need to have more women in leadership, the idea is not just to do leadership the way that it has been modeled before us in some dysfunctional, somewhat, hierarchical, patriarchal ways, but for women to bring their authentic visions, their authentic, voices, the values that they also bring, rather than thinking that they had to just sort of copy ways that aren't authentic to them, which are, as we learned through some of these answers, have been preventing women from seeing themselves as leaders. I mean, so I think that I saw that. I also saw the need, which I know that is part of that conversation, that we need, there are certain attributes or values that are deemed, in our culture, we deem them as quote, feminine, and actually they've been sort of denigrated in many ways. I don't want to affirm strict binaries, because there's masculine and feminine and all these attributes in all genders. But some of the more quote, feminine attributes, like caring, compassion, empathy, consensus building, listening, collaboration, all of these things that are obviously so needed in our world right now, that aren't typically thought of. Leadership is sometimes thought of as you're being strong and it's hierarchical and it's power over. Well, women, again, without making generalizations, often sometimes see it as, this sort of more power to, power with, lifting up the collective rather than just power for power's sake. I also was realizing how much of this is an internal process, the importance of women sharing their stories, their own journeys, things that maybe they don't think to integrate into, let's read a leadership book and it's just like skills, it's things you have to do. No, you bring your full selves, and also the internal journey of, which I know is something a lot of women struggle with, is just the internal obstacles. Or we know there's certainly structural obstacles out in the world, but that often it is also women first seeing themselves as a leader or believing in their vision. Oh, and also the fact that what I thought was really amazing that you did was there are a lot of different types of leaders. And I think sometimes we think of heads of state and, elected officials, but the fact that you had so many different kind of, athletes and composers and, heads of philanthropic organizations and from all over the world, just we all in our communities, in our work, we all can be a leader. And I think that's such an important message, because right now I think all people need to claim themselves and see themselves as a leader, rather than thinking we can leave it up to our quote, sort of elected leaders, which as we can tell in the stewardship of the world right now isn't going so well. What I like about what you're doing in bringing all these different perspectives together from so many different languages and perspectives from all over the world is, let's come up with our own shared language. Let's learn from each other, because, I think that it's really important to be exposed to all of these different, lenses and ways of talking about it, so that we can kind of redefine it rather than getting stuck in old language that really, no longer serves us or this whole conversation. I got a spark from everybody's response.
Give me some examples.
Well, there were so many, but, just a few. This one from Aparna really struck me. She said, I recognize that masculinity and femininity are qualities that reside along a spectrum. And when we say and quote, approach to leadership that resonates with women, we are also implying a feminine/feminist worldview. We are also working with the assumption that the historical trajectory of the idea of leadership and the professionalization of this trait have left women out. It is for the simple reason that we need forms and functions of leadership that not only resonate with women, but get defined by women. The opportunity for an intersectional and inclusive view of the world is made more possible if we imagine a leadership that resonates with women. When we imagine such a leadership, we introduce a chink in the armor that protects and sustains the very structures of power that control and oppress. And then this next thing that she said also is something that I've often thought about. It was good to hear someone say it out loud. Where is my critique of how women could also appropriate and misuse power? That critique is not lost on me. But to give into that critique would also mean that we fail to question the authority of a narrow definition of leadership that has dominated the world thus far. Isn't it time we imagine at least half of all world leaders being women, leading the world in a way that resonates with women? So that, I just thought there was so much in there to think about. And I just loved her language, but also, yeah, I think it's really important that we, talk about this in sort of like, thoughtful and just honest ways. And I like that people are still sort of figuring out for themselves and, challenging themselves in some of our thinking around this. So another one that I found myself thinking about a lot was from Ruba, who said, many women, especially women of color in the South, women like me, and Arab women wearing hijab, a mother of two, working with vulnerable communities, feel left out from approaches to leadership that center the white male. Today, more than ever, with the problems in our societies and communities worldwide, and the crisis in leadership that was highlighted especially after COVID, we need to rethink existing leadership models to make sure they are more inclusive and representative of all components of society. And I think the thing that I was thinking about with that was that, leadership looks even more different from a global lens where, because, when for maybe like a white woman like me, in the Western world, it's almost can become like some liminalist is just sort of like how it is, but it's even more probably pronounced when, sort of the like epitome of leadership in a global perspective is maybe, a white male from the Western world, when you're exactly, as she's saying, a woman of color in the South, an Arab woman wearing hijab, working with vulnerable communities. I just felt like it's even more pronounced and obvious how left out that they are.
And I think she would also probably change that to white English-speaking male too.
Very good point. Absolutely. And then this one from Isada also articulated something that I find, interesting, that I think about a lot. She said, this approach is needed because our world now is a global village in terms of the challenges facing us. Even though we may not see the leadership challenges in Iran or Sierra Leone as directly affecting us, we fully understand how climate change challenges are global and how leadership in this aspect affects more than just your corner of the world. It's therefore imperative that we source, harness, and emphasize leadership that is multifaceted, which focuses on nonlinear impact, which prioritizes diversity and inclusion, and which transcends borders. And in addition to that just being, obviously, so many truths, I was thinking about how, as unfortunate and concerning as climate change is, it's such a potent example for us all to like truly get that we're global. It's like the one issue, and the pandemic was similar in that too, that we were all affected by the pandemic. There were no borders to that, and also passed across borders. But climate change really is that, symbol of saying we are all affected. We need to, act together, and that we are this, this whole family here on our home planet. So I thought that was just very powerful. There was this also from Melissa. Leadership must unleash the talents of us all, not just the few. We need leaders who can do this not through command, but by believing, as mothers do, in the best in everyone's child, and committing to seeing that giftedness expressed. We frankly need more humble, caring, and serving leaders who lead not from brute strength, but from weakness, unleashing the generative gift of mutuality and wholeness. What is needed now is an active, empathetic, bridge-building leadership to reinvest resources into life systems and microeconomies, and the courage to change the current structures that no longer serve the well-being of the whole and only benefit the few. And in addition to just that being just inspiring, what I liked is also that, we often see motherhood as being this like distraction, or it's not relevant to the conversation of leadership. And whereas she's saying, and I can understand this as a mother myself, what a beautiful thought. It's also just, that idea that, because I know I feel that for my children, as she says, believing as mothers doing the best in everyone's child and committing to seeing that giftedness expressed. It's actually like, let's integrate, this concept of mothering and motherhood into leadership. So I thought that was really powerful and resonated with me a lot. Katrina also added to this. She said, I have uncovered that I still do not celebrate my motherhood enough as a leader. I do not share too much about being a mother of not just one, but to 3 boys for the risk of being judged as not professional or committed enough. So and then she says, being involved in this expedition, I'm now going to celebrate and share more of my whole self and all of the brilliant leadership skills I've developed because of being a mother and not despite it. Hopefully by doing this, I can encourage other women who are both mothers and leaders to do the same. So, I think that's just so important, that not only is that something we shouldn't have to hide, it's not something that, would distract us or hinder us, but actually it's something that, is helpful for all the reasons that you're also saying too, it is. And we also talk about Mother Earth after all. So.
But the other thing is that people are worried about using the word mothering because it's too soft and it's too gentle. Now, I don't know what you're like, but I hope I'm sometimes soft and gentle. I'm also absolutely ruthless and brutal. And if anybody threatens my children, cool, they want to watch out. So, it's soft, but it's also extremely robust.
Yes.
When is needed.
Absolutely. That's a good point. It's, I sometimes talk about myself as like also being like a mother bear, but, but also absolutely, I think that we have to bring both those. That's a very important distinction. Thank you for saying that, because those are very important. Both aspects you actually need to integrate in order to, parent your child successfully. And you need the balance of them both.
Marianne, I get the impression you enjoyed speaking to the 24 women.
I mean, how can you not? I mean, they were so full of wisdom, but I think what I most appreciated, because it's one thing to be wise, but to be so honest, like you could tell this was wisdom that was sort of just percolated from their inner beings. And it was also something that had been, if you don't mind me using this word, it feels appropriate, midwife through the process of the expedition and through you. And your leadership in allowing them to be able to share their stories and get used to that and to really probe deeply. So by the time they were sharing these responses, they were so thought through and that's my favorite types of things to write about and hear about are that type of really sort of like deep, thoughtful, candid, personal thinking.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And thank you for the article. This is the first major article about the expedition, and it's been in Forbes, and we're very, very proud and delighted and grateful to Marianne. And of course also to Aparna and Aisata and Ruba and Katrina for writing and volunteering their thoughts for Marianne's piece at this key point in the expedition when we're about 2/3 of the way through. If you want, so just to remind you, all of the 24 members of the expedition wrote pieces. And if you want to see all of them, read all of them, do go to the website. You'll find the website, womenemerging.org. You'll find the Forbes article there, and you'll also find the sort of full contribution, the written contributions of the 24 members. They're glorious things to read. So we've spoken to Deepali as we were setting off. We've talked to Theo about guiding us through the journey. We've talked to Marianne about the snapshot she took of the expedition when we were 2/3 of the way through. I think let's leave the last word to Stephanie. Now, Stephanie has been the enabler on the expedition. She, the enabler, and Lissa, who has been the disruptor. So, wait a minute, to remind you, 24 women on the expedition, but Lissa and Stephanie have had a really crucial role. Lissa as the disruptor, to try and push us to think bigger, to think longer, to think harder, to go deeper. I interviewed Lissa on episode 4 of the podcast. No, episode 5 of the podcast. So if you want to hear a whole episode on the subject of disrupting and Lissa's thoughts, they are fantastic. This is just a quick word from Stephanie, who is the enabler, who has come on the journey with us, seen me certainly through some moments of stumbling and some moments of extraordinary insight. She's, I thought I'd ask her, because she's a busy lady, why she has been the enabler, why she volunteered to be the enabler on the expedition, and where she thinks we've got to so far. So, Stephanie, you've seen lots of initiatives about leadership. Why is this one different?
This expedition is different because, it started from this vantage point of asking what's leadership that resonates with women. And for me, that broke frame for this idea that leadership has been defined historically by men leaders, men thinkers, because that's how things were. And this idea to start from scratch, not looking at existing models, existing definitions, existing research, for me, I just love this idea of this white space to be able to think and create. And I think what's different too is the amazing group of women who came together with open minds, not necessarily as leaders in a predefined sense, but leaders in their own way, expansively across boundaries, across buildings, across contexts, across geographies, across sectors. And that idea, again, such an open field and open slate to think and create, even if we came up with the exact same answer would be beneficial, but I don't think we're going to do that.
And different ages too.
And different ages, right? Different languages, different talents. It's powerful.
I mean, the group is diverse and everybody loves the fact that it's diverse. But what do you think the diversity actually adds to the expedition?
Well, Julie, if I'm honest, I think it adds discomfort, right? And I think this idea that diversity by definition is about difference, and difference is about the edges of who we are, and that we can learn on those edges to see something that otherwise we wouldn't have seen. It's because of our difference, not because of our similarities. And I think for a lot of people, the ambiguity is hard because we want to know where we're going. We want to know what the answer is, and it's not going to be something familiar. And so the diversity makes us really comfortable with the unfamiliar and new ways of thinking.
So is the enabler, we chose that word, it doesn't mean anything, does it?
I'm not sure what I've enabled, but I love the word.
I love the word. And it has to be said. I keep on saying, my advice is never lead an expedition about leadership. But my further advice is never lead an expedition about leadership without an enabler. I'm really glad you're with us. So I suppose then that my last question is, where do you think the group have got to? And do you think they're ready for Bellagio?
Well, I think the group has, I think first of all, your leadership, it's hard to lead when you're studying the leadership. So you're kind of but really keeping the mindsets open for as long as possible to resist the temptation of trying to find the answer. I think that energy and that openness is going to create a lot of power in Bellagio, because people are just ripe to say, okay, what do we think? What do we mean? And how can we express ourselves in a way that's distinctive and different? Because I think we know we're onto something, but until you start putting words to it and start having it take shape, you don't know. And I think there's a lot of energy that's ready to do that. And I think that, as things start getting categorized or bucketed or defined, then all of a sudden, you start seeing something and then can keep molding it. So I think the energy is ripe, the ideas are ripe, and it's ready to be shaped and molded and then, co-owned. So I'm excited. It's going to be phenomenal. I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see the multitude of ways of people expressing themselves through music. I'm sure there'll be some dancing and creative choice of words and medium. So I'm excited.
So there you have it. The expedition has been a huge undertaking. There's been so many women involved in making it possible at base camp, in their guiding, in their recording, in their cheering from the sides, in loving us on our way. Thank you to all and to everyone. Just a last thought. Remember that we do every 3 weeks an expedition live session. And that's where I and one of the members of the expedition pick up your questions, capture your thoughts on the subjects that we cover in the podcast, or your curiosity, no doubt, about where the expedition is and where it's going to and how it's getting there. The next live is on the 9th of December at 10 a.m. UK time. That's 9th of December at 10 a.m. UK time. I'll be with Katrina, who will help me think through the answers to your points and your questions. And indeed, if you have points and you have questions, please do either join us or send me a message on information@womenemerging.org. So I send you all my love and my thanks to everybody who has made this happen. And many of you I know who are listening to this episode are also part of the gang of women who have supported us. Thank you so much. Lots of love.
To become part of our movement and share your thinking with us, subscribe to the podcast and join the Women Emerging group on our website at womenemerging.org. We love all of the messages you send us. Keep them coming.